I had always believed my sister and I were inseparable. From childhood sleepovers to tearful late-night calls in our 30s, I was her person. So when she got engaged, I expected to be by her side, not just as family, but as her confidant. Her first call, her maid of honor. Instead, she sent me an invitation 2 months before the wedding. No call, no explanation, just a card with a floral border and my name under guest. It stung, but I smiled through it. Until 3 days before the ceremony, when one of her bridesmaids slipped up and said, "Good thing Claire dropped out. Now we still have 5. Claire? The original 5th bridesmaid? That's when I realized. I was never her first choice. I wasn't even her second. I was just a placeholder. But I didn't cause a scene. I stood tall, wore the dress they gave me, and smiled for pictures I knew I didn't belong in. And later, when the lights dimmed and the applause faded, I did something that no one saw coming, not even my sister. We grew up in a modest house in upstate New York, where winters were long and quiet, and family meant everything. My sister, Natalie, was the golden one. Blonde hair that curled just the right way, a voice that always carried, a laugh that made people turn their heads. I was quieter, darker-haired, steadier maybe. I kept things running, laundry, homework, groceries when Mom worked the late shift. But Natalie? She sparkled. Our bond was real, though. We shared secrets under blankets and planned imaginary weddings in the backyard. She told me everything. First crush, first heartbreak, college rejections. I held her hand through our parents. Divorce. I helped her pack when she moved to Chicago, then again when she came back 6 months later with tear-stained cheeks and a suitcase full of regrets. We weren't just sisters. We were allies. So when she met Daniel, a civil engineer with a gentle smile and tired eyes, I was the first to hear about him. "He's not flashy," she said, "but I feel calm around him, like I can breathe." I was happy for her, genuinely. We talked about wedding venues, colors, and music. I offered to help with planning, made spreadsheets, even started casually, looking at dresses online. Then, silence. Weeks passed. Every time I brought up the wedding, she changed the subject. "Still figuring things out," she'd say. Or, "It's just all happening so fast I can't think straight." Until one day, an envelope arrived in the mail. Heavy cardstock, blush pink, elegant. My name is printed carefully on the front. Inside, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Natalie Grace Whitmore and Daniel Keith Lansing." No note, no, "I'd love for you to stand by me," no, "We finally picked a date." Just a seat assignment. Row B, table 6. I stared at it for a long time, my chest tight with something I couldn't yet name. Hurt? Confusion? Embarrassment? I called her that night. She didn't pick up. I texted, "Got your invite. Didn't realize. I was just a guest." Her reply came 3 hours later. "It's been hard to choose. So many people to consider. Please don't take it personally." But I did. And the worst part was, I didn't even know why. In the days after I received the invitation, I tried to talk myself out of the ache sitting in my chest. She must be overwhelmed. Planning a wedding is stressful. Maybe she's avoiding favoritism. I told myself every version of the story that could make her decision easier to swallow. But none of it felt true. I knew Natalie, knew how meticulous she was, how image-conscious. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was deliberate. And that realization stung in a way I couldn't put into words. Still, I RSVP'd. Yes. I couldn't imagine not going. This was my sister's wedding, and if I had to sit on the sidelines, so be it. I'd smile, clap, and play the part of the supportive sibling. That was what I'd always done. About a week later, I was helping our mom with errands when she casually mentioned the bridesmaids' luncheon. "I hope Nat doesn't overdo it with those girls," she said, chuckling. "They're sweet, but they're more her college friends. You've always been more grounded." I blinked. "She's already had the luncheon?" "Last Saturday. Didn't she tell you? No, she hadn't. I smiled and changed the subject, but inside, something cracked. I wasn't just excluded from the ceremony, I wasn't part of anything. Then, 3 days before the wedding, Natalie finally called. Her voice was chipper, like nothing had happened. Hey, quick question. Would you be okay wearing a sage green dress this weekend, same as the girls? I hesitated. Am I in the bridal party now? Well, she laughed lightly. Claire had to drop out. Her boyfriend's in the hospital, something with his liver. Total chaos, so we're down a girl and the photos will be unbalanced. I thought it made sense to have you fill in, since you're family. Since you're family. Those words echoed with such irony, I almost laughed. She hadn't considered me for the group initially, but now, when her perfect symmetry was disrupted, I was convenient. An empty space to fill. I swallowed hard. Sure. What time should I be there? She gave me details, where to pick up the dress, when the rehearsal was. She thanked me, said she knew I'd understand, and ended the call without asking once how I felt. The next day, I arrived at the boutique and picked up the dress, sage green chiffon, flattering but clearly tailored for someone else. The clerk handed it to me with a polite smile. Glad they found someone. Natalie was so stressed. So stressed, she forgot her own sister. That night, at the rehearsal dinner, I met the other bridesmaids. They were bubbly, beautiful, dressed, in matching ivory blouses and gold jewelry. When I introduced myself, one of them, Emily, I think, said, "Oh, right, you're Natalie's sister. Backup bridesmaid, huh? That's so sweet of you to step in." Backup, like a spare tire. I smiled. Of course I did. What else was there to do? But inside, I felt like a guest at a life I used to be a part of. The Natalie I knew, the one who clung to me in college dorm rooms, who once said, "You're the only person who really gets me," had vanished into seating charts and photo ops. And I had to ask myself a painful question. Had she outgrown me? Or had she simply decided I no longer fit the version of herself she wanted to show the world? That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling I'd once plastered with glow-in-the-dark stars. I thought about all the times I showed up for her. No spotlight, no audience, just love. And I knew then, I would stand up at that altar. I would wear the dress, hold the flowers, smile for the photos, but I wouldn't lose myself in the process. The morning of the wedding dawned overcast, with low-hanging clouds that made everything feel quieter than usual. I arrived at the bridal, suite precisely at 9 a.m., dressed in a robe matching the other bridesmaids. Though mine had clearly been monogrammed last, the initials stitched slightly off-center. A small detail, but it said everything. The room buzzed with the energy of curling irons, mimosa flutes, and light squeals over last-minute accessories. Natalie was in the center, wrapped in ivory satin, beaming. When she saw me, her expression softened into something practiced, polite. "You made it," she said, as though I were a distant cousin she hadn't seen in years. "Of course I did," I replied. We hugged briefly. There was no warmth in it, only formality. She turned back to her reflection before I had even let go. The makeup artist waved me over. "We're doing the girls in order of photo sequence," she said. "You'll be fifth." Fifth, after Emily, Sarah, Jordan, and Becca, the originals. The ones Natalie had chosen before life forced her to remember her own sister. I sat quietly as she powdered my face and pinned back my hair. Around me, the others chatted about inside jokes I didn't recognize and group texts I'd never been added to. They shared stories of bachelorette weekend mishaps, the spa day Natalie had booked, the playlist she'd made for the drive to wine country. I nodded politely, though every word tightened something in my chest. I was surrounded by celebration, but all I felt was the unmistakable sensation of being tolerated. When it was time for photos, we stood in a garden behind the chapel, flowers blooming in gentle disarray. The photographer, a man with soft eyes and a commanding tone, began arranging them. Bridesmaids, line up, Natalie in the center. He gestured for them to take formation, then paused when he noticed me hovering slightly to the side. You, green dress, you're part of this, right? I nodded. Natalie cleared her throat. Yes, she's in. Fifth from the left. The words stung more than I expected. Not my sister, not this is Anna. Just a nameless placeholder, fifth from the left. The photo session continued with polite efficiency. We smiled, adjusted, and posed. I did everything right. But as the shutter clicked, I felt like I was disappearing, frame by frame. Later, back in the suite, Natalie handed each bridesmaid a small box with her initials embossed in gold. Inside were pearl earrings and handwritten notes, personalized with little memories and thank yous. When I opened mine, there were earrings, no note. I looked up. Natalie was laughing with Jordan, unaware. Or maybe she was aware and chose to look away. That's when I realized this wasn't just forgetfulness or poor planning. It was a quiet erasure. It had become inconvenient, embarrassing perhaps, a reminder of something less curated than the version of herself she wanted to present. And in that moment, the grief I'd been holding back quietly settled into something else. Clarity. I wasn't going to fight for space in someone's life who had already written me out of their story. After the ceremony, I stood in the corner of the reception hall, swirling ginger ale and a champagne flute, watching people toast to a future I was no longer part of. Natalie floated from table to table, a vision in lace and candlelight beaming beside Daniel. She looked radiant, unbothered, complete. I should have felt joy, I should have been proud, but all I felt was the quiet ache of displacement, like I was witnessing someone else's happiness from behind soundproof glass. I wasn't angry, I didn't want to ruin her day, but somewhere deep within, a voice I'd ignored for years began to rise. Why do you keep shrinking to fit where you're not welcome? I'd spent a lifetime being the steady one, the backup, the helper, the listener. I had poured myself into being useful, dependable, available. Somewhere along the way, I'd mistaken invisibility for virtue. It was easier to be needed than to be known. But now, standing in a room filled with floral centerpieces and choreographed first dances, I felt the weight of everything I had never said, like how it hurts to be left out of dress fittings, or how I had cried when her engagement was announced online before she even called me, or how I had rehearsed my reaction to this day, promising myself I wouldn't make it about me. And I hadn't. I smiled, showed up, and stepped in when asked. I had played my part in her perfect picture, but I no longer wanted to. I walked outside, for air, the night cool against my skin. The stars were faint above the tented lights, and laughter carried from inside like an echo from a life I no longer belonged to. Behind me, the door opened and closed softly. It was Daniel. I just wanted to say thank you, he said, for stepping in. Natalie told me it meant a lot. I nodded. Of course. He paused. You okay? I looked at him. This man who barely knew me, but saw more in that moment than my own. Sister had. I will be, I said honestly. And I meant it, because for the first time I wasn't hiding how I felt, and that, I realized, was a start. 2 weeks after the wedding, Natalie called. It was a Wednesday morning. I remember because I was slicing strawberries for a quiet breakfast alone, still in my robe, enjoying the silence that came with no longer performing a role I hadn't been asked to play. Her name flashed across my phone screen, and for a moment, I considered letting it ring, but I didn't. I picked it up. Hey, she said, cheerful but cautious. Hi. A pause, then, I wanted to check in. Things have been so crazy I haven't had a second to breathe. I let that hang in the air. She filled it quickly. The wedding was amazing, right? Everyone said it felt like a dream. Can't believe how it all came together. I smiled faintly, though I knew she couldn't see it. It looked beautiful. She hesitated. I also wanted to say thank you for being part of it, especially last minute. I know it wasn't how things should have gone, wasn't it? I asked, softly but clearly. Silence. She sighed. Okay. I know I handled some things wrong. I should have called you earlier, asked you properly, made you part of the planning. I didn't know how to balance everything. I thought keeping things simple would avoid drama. But you knew I'd notice, I said, that I'd feel it. I guess I hoped you'd understand. That was the thing about Natalie. She always counted on my understanding. It had become the currency of our relationship, her mistakes exchanged for my quiet grace. I do understand, I said finally, but it still hurts. I'm sorry, she replied. Really? I think I got so focused on creating this perfect moment, I lost sight of who was standing with me. That was the most honest thing she'd said in years. And yet, even in that apology, something inside me remained cautious. Not angry, just aware. Aware that being acknowledged only when things fell apart wasn't love. It was convenient. We talked a little longer about her honeymoon plans, about how Daniel was adjusting to married life. She asked if I wanted to meet for lunch soon, just the two of us. I said I'd think about it. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a while. No tears came, no boiling emotion, just a steady recognition. I didn't need her validation to feel whole. I didn't need to be at the center of her world to reclaim the center of mine. I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. Writing has always been my escape. But now, it felt like a return to something that had always been mine, waiting. I wrote about sisters, about loyalty and disappointment and the ache of not being chosen. I didn't name names, I didn't need to. It was enough just to speak. And as I wrote, a thought crystallized. Sometimes healing doesn't come from the person who hurt you. Sometimes it comes from finding the voice you gave up long before the pain even began. That was my truth. That was my beginning. I was always standing beside her, but she only turned to me when someone else stepped out. And that was the day I finally stepped back. Not in anger, but in clarity. Because I wasn't just her backup. I was someone worth choosing. Even if she never did, I finally chose myself. About a month after the wedding, I received a group text from Natalie. It was cheerful, filled with exclamation points and a handful of candid wedding photos. Finally got our full album back, she wrote. Thought I'd share some favs. I scrolled through the pictures, her and Daniel dancing, their kiss under a canopy of lights, the bridal party clinking glasses. Each image seemed to highlight joy, symmetry, perfection. Then I came across one that stopped me. A posed shot of the bridesmaids. 5 women in sage green, arms linked, laughter frozen midair. Except I wasn't in it. She had cropped me. Out. My heart thudded. I checked again, zoomed in, hoping it was a mistake. But no, the positioning confirmed it. What had originally been a full shot of all of us had been edited. I remembered that exact photo being taken, standing awkwardly beside Jordan with my bouquet too low. But now, it was as if I hadn't been there at all. At first, I told myself not to overreact. Maybe she just preferred the tighter frame. Maybe it wasn't intentional. But when I checked her Instagram later that night, there it was, the same cropped image. Dozens of likes, comments, from friends saying, "What a stunning crew," and "Love these girls." Still no mention of me, no tag, no trace. I sat back and stared at the screen, the dull hum of betrayal rising again. Not because I wasn't in the photo, but because this was a choice. A choice to present a version of her life in which I didn't exist, even at her own wedding. I didn't confront her immediately. I let the silence speak first. 2 days later, she texted me directly. "Hey, saw you didn't like any of the wedding photos. Everything okay?" I didn't respond right away. When I finally replied, I wrote, "I saw you cropped me out, and honestly, I'm done pretending that doesn't mean something." Her response came quickly, defensive. "It wasn't personal. The photo just looked better that way. Why are you always so sensitive?" That word, sensitive, cut deeper than she knew. Because for years I'd been quiet so she could be loud, supportive so she could be seen. And now I was finally feeling it. No more silence, no more second-row seats in a life where I once mattered. She only turned to me when someone else turned away. That was the rhythm of our relationship for years, my presence filling gaps, soothing tensions, softening consequences. And I let it happen, again and again, until the night I saw my own absence curated online, edited out like clutter. That was when I stopped asking why she kept overlooking me, and started asking why I kept forgiving it. In the week that followed, our text exchange, Natalie went quiet again. No apology, no clarification, no effort to bridge the space growing steadily between us. I didn't chase her. I didn't call. For once, I let the silence serve me. But the silence didn't mean peace. Inside, I was wrestling with the deeper betrayal, one that had less to do with a photo crop or a dress fitting and more to do with a lifetime of emotional imbalance. I had built so much of our bond on unspoken agreements that I would understand. When she forgot, that I would adjust when she needed space, that I would celebrate her even when she excluded me. And now that I was no longer playing along, she didn't know how to meet me where I stood. One Saturday afternoon, I got a call from our mom. Her tone was gentle, hesitant. "Natalie came by this morning. She's upset." I took a breath. "About the wedding stuff?" "About the distance," she said carefully. "She feels like you're punishing her." I laughed softly, not out of amusement, out of disbelief. "She's punishing herself," I said. "She just doesn't like that," I finally noticed. Our mother sighed. "She's your sister." "Yes," I said, "and I've been hers too, for a long time." That evening, I found myself staring at the old family photo on my bookshelf. We were young, me and Natalie, in matching holiday dresses, arms wrapped around each other like the world couldn't shake us. I stared at my own face in the frame and wondered, what would that girl say if she saw what we had become? Would she believe that the same sister she adored would one day treat her like a footnote? I opened my laptop, and without overthinking it, I began to write, not fiction this time, but a personal essay. I titled it, "The Backup Sister." In it, I didn't name names or shame anyone. I simply told the truth, about being sidelined, about emotional erasure, about the grief of being replaced not by strangers, but by silence. I wrote from the place inside me that had gone numb trying to stay polite, and when I finished, I submitted it to a popular online magazine known for essays about women, family, and quiet pain. I didn't expect a reply. I didn't write it for fame. I wrote it to reclaim my own narrative. 4 days later, the editor responded. She loved it, said it was honest, sharp, and resonant. They wanted to publish it the following week. I stared at the email for a long time, not because I was shocked, but because I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Heard. That article went live on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had already gathered hundreds of comments, most from women, saying things like, "This is my life too," and "Thank you for putting it into words." At 2:37 p.m., Natalie texted me. "I read your piece. I can't believe you'd air our dirty laundry like that." I read her words twice, then closed my phone. I didn't respond. Because her discomfort wasn't the story. The story was that I had finally stepped forward, not to harm, not to shame, but to heal. And healing, I was learning, often comes at the cost of other people's comfort. A week after the article was published, Natalie showed up at my apartment. She didn't call first. She just appeared at my door holding a box of pastries from The cafe we used to love as teenagers. Her eyes were tired, her makeup minimal, her voice softer than I'd heard in years. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the couch, the box unopened between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet wasn't tense, it was honest. Finally, she said, "I didn't think the peace would hurt this much. But it did." I nodded. "It wasn't meant to hurt you. It was meant to tell the truth." She looked at me then, not with defensiveness, but with recognition. "I've always counted on you to forgive me, to just take it." "I know. And I used that," she admitted. "Not always on purpose, but I did." It was strange hearing her say it aloud, strange and freeing. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she continued, "for not making space for you at my wedding, for letting you feel like an afterthought, for letting other people take the places you earned." I believed her, not because the words were perfect, but because, for once, they weren't polished. They were real. I didn't cry. I didn't wrap my arms around her in a dramatic moment of reconciliation. But I did say, "Thank you." She opened the pastry box. Inside were 2 slices of lemon cake, our childhood favorite. We ate in silence, the way people do when words have done enough. Before she left, she asked, "Will we be okay?" "I think so," I said. "But not the same as before." She nodded. "Maybe that's okay too." And I agreed. In the weeks that followed, things between us didn't return to how they were, but they didn't fall apart either. We spoke more, intentionally, no pretending, no shallow smiles. Just small, honest efforts to rebuild, not what we had, but something better, something grown. And through it all, I kept writing. Because even if she never read another word I published, I'd finally remembered who I was without waiting for her approval. And that was the most lasting piece of all. Time has a quiet way of sorting what words never can. It's been 6 months since Natalie's wedding, and while we're not as close as we once were, there's an honesty between us now that feels more real than all the closeness we used to fake. We don't speak every day. Sometimes, not even every week. But when we do, the conversation isn't wrapped in performance. It's simple, human, and mutual. She asks how my writing is going. I ask how married life feels. We both try, not to impress, not to mend, but to meet each other. Where we are, it's enough. What I've learned, more than anything, is that family isn't about obligation. It's not about smiling through pain or playing a role someone wrote for you years ago. It's about presence, choice, the willingness to see and be seen without flinching. And sometimes, the people closest to us aren't capable of that right away. Sometimes, they never are. That's a grief of its own. But it doesn't have to be the end of your voice. I spent most of my life waiting to be chosen by people I never needed permission from to begin with. I gave up room for others to shine, thinking it made me good, when really, it just made me disappear. But not anymore. Now, I light candles even when there's no one to eat dinner with. I submit stories without asking if they're good enough. I wake up each morning not wondering where I fit in someone else's picture, but asking what kind of picture I want to paint myself. And the answer, more often than not, is simple, one where I'm not standing on the sidelines. Because being someone's sister doesn't mean being silent, and showing love doesn't mean losing yourself. We can hold people accountable and hold the door open. We can forgive without forgetting. We can choose peace, not because it was handed to us, but because we built it from what was left. And in that truth, I've found something far more powerful than belonging. Sometimes we don't realize how much of ourselves we've given away, until we stand in a room where we're only present by accident. That wedding didn't just show me my sister's priorities. It revealed my own pattern of self-neglect, of waiting to be chosen, waiting to be appreciated, waiting to matter. But healing began the moment I stopped waiting. Life now is quieter, but fuller. I've published 3 essays since then. One was about childhood loyalty, another about adult boundaries. Readers wrote in, strangers mostly, saying they felt seen. It reminded me that stories don't need permission to be powerful. They just need to be told. Natalie and I are redefining what sisterhood means, no longer built on obligation or history, but on effort and truth. She shows up more mindfully now. I do too, but not at my own expense. We're not perfectly close, and that's okay. Closeness isn't always the goal. Sometimes, understanding is. I've also learned that love isn't less valuable just because it changes. What matters is whether we love others without forgetting to love ourselves in the process. And the most beautiful thing? I no longer feel like anyone's backup. I am at long last my own main character. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the backup in your own family, quietly showing up while others overlooked you, know this: your voice matters. You are not invisible. Share this video with someone who needs that reminder today. Leave a comment below and tell us your moment of awakening, when you choose yourself after years of being secondary. And don't forget to subscribe for more deeply personal, emotional family stories where quiet strength leads to healing. Because the most powerful transformation starts not when others finally see us, but when we finally see ourselves.